Okay, so it's just now 10:30, and I think a good time to get started with today's webinar. Thank you to those of you who are in attendance, and welcome to those of you who will be watching this after the fact. Today we're going to be talking about team performance, and while many of these webinar and training sessions are designed to be provided for doctors or office managers, this is one that we are hoping will have some more use for you. We would like to see if it's something that you can pass on to the rest of your team and have them watch this individually. We'd like to see if it's something that you can have in mind and follow through with as you conduct your own staff meetings in the practice. So hopefully a little versatility to today's subject, and we'll certainly open it up for questions at the end and see if there's anything that you'd like to jump in on right now. Basically, the starting point is that if you're seeing this, then for some reason or another, in some capacity or another, your practice is working with ePracticeManager, or will be, or could be, and we just want to introduce ourselves, let you know that we're a practice management company that also runs an online training system that is designed to help practices achieve their goals. And it can be confusing to practices that haven't used that type of format before, so providing some insight on what exactly that means and how things will move forward is usually a very nice step to take. Now, whether you're working with ePracticeManager or not, a lot of practices are working on their own practices. And that's important to do. We can't just let things remain the way that they always have. Most people come to ePracticeManager because they want to change something about the practice. Oftentimes they want to grow the whole practice, do more. Sometimes they want to grow a portion of the practice, like the hygiene portion of a practice, or maybe the implant portion of a specialty or a general practice.
Where's the audio on this, Dave?
It might be on the TV.
Oh,
if the TV audio needs to go up.
Could we mute microphones if possible?
Is he doing that right now?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There we go. There we go.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. So is the case that there are parts of the practice that are looking to improve, it usually comes down to just helping people to do the work that they're already doing. And in a sense, that boils down to efficiency. Efficiency gets a pretty bad reputation. People hear that word and it sounds like it can be very, very sterile, corporate, missing the point. And I know that people have experiences like that in a corporate environment, in other parts of life. I think we're talking about something different, and it is important to make the distinction. In a practice context, one way or another, you guys are already doing what you're doing, and it's happening on a day-to-day basis. So efficiency in a practice context has to do with streamlining your operations and making it easier for you to do what you're already doing. And this comes down to kind of eliminating obstacles, if you will. So let's talk about why it's different in a practice than it is in a corporation, for example. Well, the practice environment is pretty unique. You've got an owner of your business, typically a doctor, who is also a provider in your practice. Doctors spend the majority of their time working as providers, and they don't have a lot of time for management. If they take time for management, we find that they do this evenings, weekends, times where patients aren't scheduled, so the two activities aren't really happening at the same time. Sometimes the staff aren't there when the doctor is tending to management responsibilities, so the coordination is difficult. So you can either be working on the practice or you can be working in the practice, but it's difficult to do both at the same time. So as you know, a lot of practices will set up an office manager format in those circumstances. But an office manager doesn't really have any different circumstances with the doctor than the rest of the team does, right? Difficult to have access. When are you going to do the analysis? How do you strategize? How does the doctor and the office manager participate personally in the implementation, decision-making, things like that? So it becomes even further complicated and more interesting because you guys do all of your work in public. Even if you don't have a patient that you're working on right at that moment and you have an opportunity to get together and have a conversation, there's other patients. They're on the phone, they're in the waiting room. So the majority of the time, you're in a public environment trying to talk about a different subject that may be personal in nature, and it just minimizes this coordination factor. When we can't coordinate, when we can't communicate freely, we do have difficulty with efficiency. So how does that work exactly? Well, mostly here's what happens. You have a problem that arises in the practice and you handle it. And when people are working with a consultant or with us for coaching purposes, let's say, they tell us what a great job they do of that. And I'm sure that it's true. Of course you do. You have the best interest of your patient at heart. You're working strenuously to make sure that that one patient gets the resolution that they need. And more often than not, you pull it off just to perfection, of course. However, there's a downside to that from a management perspective. What ends up happening is that you're solving your problems one at a time. Well, what about when that particular problem is persistent? It doesn't solve quite as well. What if it's repetitive, comes up all the time? What if you have particular parts of the problem set that escalate and they get to be more and more important? And they require changes, but you kind of handled the byproduct of the patient who's in front of you, but haven't really taken up the bigger change of the system that's needed. So ideally, what we would like to see is a little bit more of an approach to comprehensive resolutions. Now, this also can sound interesting to people who are engaging in this process for the first time or have had success or failure doing it over time. But let's talk about why we take this approach. If you can step back and look at something, if you can do it early, if you can do it often, you have more time and you have more flexibility to deal with that situation. That means your solutions are better. That means that they're better thought out. That means that they're tested and you don't have to do what you think will be the best solution in front of somebody for the first time and bumble around and invent the wheel right there on the spot. So what ends up happening is that you get some distance, you get some time, and you get some coordination in order to really fine-tune what an ideal solution would be, to put it into place, to play around with how the rollout of that occurs, to experiment a little bit and make adjustments along the way. And that's something that people really appreciate once they get it into place. So how do we do that? How do we get to those bigger fixes, those more comprehensive fixes in a practice? Well, you hear about efficiency, you hear about training, coordination, communication, and even this has its challenges. That can be vague for people. Sometimes it means different things to different people. So we try and keep this as objective as possible. It's difficult to say, do you have good communication? And people say, yeah, we have great communication. She's sitting right next to me. I talk to her all the time, that kind of thing. Well, communication takes on a little bit of a different meaning when we bring into play that the right people, maybe the front and the back office, need to be communicating about the right subject, let's say the schedule, and they need to represent all the parts of the equation. Schedule optimization means different things to the back office and to the front office. So you have to get all of the view represented and sort through it and come up with solutions that have common resolutions for both sides of the equation. And there's usually more than two sides to that equation. So in doing this, our main goal is to keep things as objective as possible. And when you've got a practice that's made up of people in that there are staff, there are patients, there are other practices that you work with, you have vendors and outside people that you work with as well. Objective is hard to find. You need a measurement. You need something that everybody can see the same way as the lowest common denominator. So we start with statistics, key performance indicators, and we use these numbers to show us what's going on in the practice. Now, once again, this can get a sterile, corporate, off-putting type of reputation when you start talking about statistics. Well, let's make a couple of clarifications here. Number one, it's not all about the money. That is not what we're talking about. What we're here to do is to help the patients. But we do have to count something. We have to count some part of the practice and the repetitive processes that we have so that we know how it's going. If we're putting all of this effort into something, how is it going? Do we need to change something? Do we need to take some really strong efforts to reinforce something that's going very, very well in the practice? Do we need more resources being brought into play? How would we know if we can't compare how it's going now to how it's gone at another time in the past? Sometimes you get to the end of a month and you say, oh, wow, what a month. I really felt it. And sometimes your numbers reflect that or they don't. Well, if you've had that kind of a month in the practice, we want to make very, very sure that the effort that you're putting into it is being analyzed, it's being strategized, and that we're moving forward with the things that will either make it easier or help you to do that again if you want to, or help you to change what you don't want to do about that. So taking a statistical approach often leads to matters of performance. Now, this can be a turnoff. Somebody's saying, oh, you're going to be looking at our performance and what we're doing. I work hard. We know, we agree. Sometimes the idea that your hard work isn't being acknowledged to the degree that it should be is the point. And that's why we want to look at performance and why we want to look at statistics. So when we're using statistics, it's a starting point. It's not the whole story, it's the start of the story. Once we have some good statistics, let's say we're looking at the production, let's say that we're looking at the new patient flow, let's say that we're looking at certain parts of cost savings measures for things like that. Well, what does it tell us? How are we doing? And what do we see? So now we start getting into performance. Please don't misunderstand that this is about one person's performance and attacking them because they are or are not doing a good job. In performance, we're actually talking about a group activity, and individual performance is sometimes best evaluated in relationship to whole team performance. So what do we mean by that? Well, what if you have two people and they're working on two different parts of the practice? So you have Sally and Jane, and they spend part of their time working in the front office and part of their time working in the back office. They're loyal, proven, dedicated staff members. They do a good job. They can handle anything you send their way, and what a blessing to have these people on the team. When they work in the front office, everything goes smoothly, the patients get handled, everybody's happy. When they work in the back office, still have problems, a couple of sticky things, things that don't resolve, things that are just not taking more time than they should. Wow, that's difficult. Well, the problem is probably not Sally and Jane, right? Because they're otherwise loyal and productive staff members. And then when they work on this type of work in the front office, things go very, very well. When they work in the back office, things don't go as well. So is that a matter of the people, or is that a matter of the system? Is that a matter of the performance as it relates to individual personality types, or is it just a matter of performance being inhibited by lack of management? You don't have the systems that you need, you don't have the support that you need, and I'm sure that these ladies could use some help with what they're trying to accomplish in the back office. So when we're talking about performance, we need to take a look at where we naturally do well. What strengths do we have? How can we lend those strengths to an approach in another part of the practice that maybe isn't doing as well? What if we have people who are doing what they're doing and they're the only ones who know how to do it, and they're the only ones who know how to get the results that they're getting? Well, sometimes someone from the outside needs to do an evaluation of that and find out what's working. And oftentimes they need to export the best parts of that person's work to another part of the practice and lend it to the other team members so that they can make use of it in their own position. So as we go through these different situations, we find that it needs to come back to the point, which is working with patients. If you have people who are doing things different ways when it comes to the patients, maybe their post-operative instructions are different, maybe their appointment making is different, maybe their communication about insurance matters is different, what ends up happening is that the issue becomes confused and the patients experience different parts of things taking place. So if we're going to get patients through it, we should take the best, the cream of the crop, the top of what's working for everybody, and combine it into processes that will really move things forward for the office and the patient at the same time. So how do we do that? Well, most of the time systems and optimization and coordination works best when somebody is in charge of it. And that can become a bit interesting in a practice. Who's supposed to be in charge of what? I'm already in charge of so many things, or she's in charge of that, but she never gets to it. Having clear definition and knowing who's in charge of what in a practice can just come down to realizing where the responsibilities lie. Who do I go to when I'm in trouble? Who do I go to when something goes really well and I want to identify it and clarify it and congratulate that person? So when you hear about this responsibility, you hear about management and somebody being in charge of the activity, we get into the next part of a management program and your work with ePracticeManager or your own work on your own practice. This takes us into the territory of things like job descriptions for each position in the office. We start moving pretty quickly into the area of statistics and which statistics are appropriate for which parts of the practice. It gives us the idea that we need to have meetings, we need to have performance reviews, and these are important parts for us to tend to in a practice. Instead of it being off-putting, we need to make sure that our approach to this is something that everybody talks about in advance and agrees to. So when you hear about things like job descriptions or meetings coming into play, it's not that anyone thinks that you don't know what you're doing. Sometimes it's just the opposite. Sometimes others don't know the best parts of how you're approaching things and what they can add from their position to your position, or what they can take from your position and your approach and do it in their own area of the practice. So the idea that we're working off of here is that the person who's doing the work is often the expert. You're there. Even if you don't know how to solve every single problem, you're exposed to what people are saying and what they're doing and the situations that arise, and you're seeing that more than anyone else. So you are in a perfect position to provide that data and contribute to the solutions that the practice needs, the ones that will really work, the ones that will really last. And that's the way that you can get out of this corporate, misunderstood, sterile, statistical type of approach. If you have somebody who's coordinating with you and coming to you and saying, we're having this problem, tell me what you're up against, tell me what you're experiencing, how does it go for you? And that person is able to coordinate with front office and back office operations and come to conclusions that will really meet the needs of the practice overall, then you're going to have an entirely different result if we're doing this one at a time, one patient at a time, one situation at a time approach. So why is this important? Well, we're here to take care of patients. And that can be quite interesting at times. You know that you have opened your doors and you've invited these people to come to you for care. They oftentimes don't want to be there. They oftentimes don't understand what's involved with taking care of their own health and making it a priority. They're oftentimes in pain. They're oftentimes concerned about the financial side of things. Sometimes insurance comes into play, and that is a largely misunderstood subject on the part of many patients. There's just so much to coordinate. Even just getting one patient through their entire process and tying up all the loose ends, that can be challenging in and of itself. So that means that all of our coordination has to take place in advance. It has to take place behind the scenes. It has to be so invisible and so seamless for the patient that we can all keep our focus on the patients at all times. So another way to say it is the patients get all the crazy, right? And I'm not implying that your patients are crazy. I'm just saying they have challenging circumstances and the situation can get a little crazy. Well, that's got to be the biggest thing in the room. Our approach to taking care of that for them is what we're here to do. And when we add our own problems and situations and crazy to the situation, it just means that we're doing less of it for them. So the more that we work out our own concerns over time, finding real solutions, the better we can keep our side of things out of the equation. So there's another reason why this is important. Everybody in a practice wants to feel accomplished. You're doing good work, and it's important work that needs to be done for your community. Everybody wants to gain satisfaction from helping others and a job well done and working together with your team to make that happen. But the level of satisfaction for team members, especially in a dental team, it can be diminished when we don't develop the right things. So let's talk about the development of these areas of the practice that we need to focus on in order to make the kind of progress that we want to, in order to take the practice from where we are now to where we want to be. And again, that's not an accusation that anything's wrong with the practice as it stands. It's just that we have goals. We have somewhere that we want to take things, and that could be a matter of ease in the delivery of our services. It could be growth, but in any case, here's what we're going to need and something to keep in mind. an objective way of looking at things in the practice. We have to bring statistics into play. They have to be smart, reasoned, logical, accurate statistics that show us how things are going, how they're going now. How does that feel compared to what we're living day to day? Does it compare to a different time when we've been doing the same activity? Are we doing more or less? Do we need to bring other resources into play given what the statistics are telling us? We also need to understand that we have to have the right person in charge of the right activity to get the right result. This means that people know what positions they're in, they know how those positions are run, and they know how to coordinate one position to the next so that we can solve the bigger problems and keep those solutions moving forward for the practice. We need a way of coordinating with each other to reinforce the pluses and address the problems that we have. This oftentimes comes in the form of meetings. We do have huddles and staff meetings and things like that. Some practices focus on that more than others. But we do need to have coordination even outside of those meetings. Sometimes it's a departmental approach, sometimes it's a doctor and manager approach. So we need to keep that in mind as well. We have to take a look at the path that we're on, reviewing it and making sure that we stay on the path that we've decided to set out on and that we make course corrections along the way. We don't go off-roading here. And sometimes the team can help each other to do that in very unique ways, just by reminding ourselves of our purposes and keeping to the plan that we have and getting each other through the rough times with some support, but the coordination is a part of this as well. The last thing is that a team has a very unique opportunity to validate the progress that's being made. You guys are in these shoes and in this situation every day, every week, every month, and you have the opportunity to look up and say, you know what, it's getting better, it's getting easier. I remember when that was a challenge and it's just not anymore. Or I heard the way that you handled that and that was amazing. And I want to make sure that we're doing that all throughout the whole practice. Those kinds of things are things that are very personal to a team. It's also important to take the management step of validating what's right and making sure that you're moving forward with that. So to do this, you're going to have someone in your office who's asking questions, and you need that. When the person is doing that, it is important that we all agree to take this in the spirit in which it's intended. Nobody's looking at you or your work or the way that you've ever always done things and condemning it. What we're trying to do is make sure that we just get the data that we need, or we don't have enough details to really see the full picture. If we can all agree that checking these things out, it's not an accusation, it's not an eye-rolling foreshadowing of all the terrible things that are going to come, it's not boring and terrible, it's actually quite an easy process and it can move along more quickly than you think if we all participate. So when somebody comes to you and they have questions about your area, the way that you're doing things, just understand that they may be, in the long run, in the bigger picture, combining that data from all the parts of the practice to suggest improvements. We may be calling meetings. We may be recommending individual training or whole team training. But again, this is a means to an end. If a practice wanted to stay exactly the way that it is, you could take that approach. We find that it often doesn't work. A lot of practices that just try and maintain and hold steady, they actually begin to decline over time because they're not taking a big enough view. Even if you want to stay the same, you have to expand to some degree because you lose patients, right? Every practice loses 8 to 10% of its patients in any given year because people move and people die and people change insurance and people have different circumstances. So if you're just trying to hold steady, you're actually shrinking. So there is some kind of growth that needs to be planned for and taking place in the practice. And to do that, we need to take a look at where we are and where we want to be. And to get where we want to be, we're going to be looking at some changes and some improvements, but it can be subtle, it can be helpful, it can be logical and well thought out, and it doesn't need to be an inhibition of what you already know needs to take place in the practice. So open communication is the key to all of this. We need more ways to communicate. We need better ways to communicate. We need to come to the right conclusions. We need to implement the right adjustments from the start and keep the confidence of the staff and the patients because what we're doing is so on point and logical and helpful. Management is supposed to help people to get their work done. So if you are in a situation where management is coordinating with you, understand that contributing to the ideas and solutions is what's going to help what you're already doing to become easier, what you're already doing to happen more smoothly, what you're already doing to contribute to other parts of the practice in a positive way. So there isn't much of a downside to this when we get into that. This is worth the investment because in the end, it's the patients who see the benefit. We take better care of the patients that are already a part of our practice. They don't slip through the cracks. They get the best care. They see the results. They feel better. They tell others about you. But we're also more available to the patients who need our help, those in the community who want the services that we provide and should reach out to us but haven't for one reason or another. And that increases our capacity to be there for those in our community. So with that in mind, I'd like to just give a few examples of where you can expect this type of coordination. Let's say that we're talking about a job description, a meeting, performance evaluation, things like that. What are the topics in a practice that you could see these things pointed at, and where could you expect those discussions to go? Well, scheduling is always at the top of the list for any practice. Oftentimes, an optimized schedule or a productive schedule means something entirely different to the front office than it does to the back office. The front office could be saying, oh, phew, I filled all the slots. We have a full day. That is a good schedule. A very, very busy practice could be saying, oh, I got everybody who called in and everybody who was on the schedule. The jigsaw pieces have fallen into place and I've got everything lined up and it's the way that it's supposed to be. Back office could be thinking of surviving the day, getting the rooms turned over and the treatment provided. The doctor and an office manager could be thinking of productivity. You know, we have a big list of people who need these big services that we provide. Are we only tending to small situations and seeing patients that we've already seen and just need to do a small service for? Are we actually getting to and retiring the bigger batches of service and treatment that people need from us? So again, when it comes to productive scheduling, that means different things to different people, and you can anticipate conversations about that. What should our schedule be? How can it meet everybody's needs? How can it accomplish what we want it to? How can it get the patients treated and cared for, but also flow seamlessly for all of us? Treatment coordination is a big one. If we're going to get all of these patients into the office and into the schedule, we need to help them move forward with the treatments that they need. Otherwise, we're seeing them and telling them a lot of things, but they leave and they don't take care of their small problems when they are small problems, so they become bigger problems. So how we communicate with our patients, how we care for them, how we work with them together to get them scheduled for the treatment that they need, and then through that treatment, that's a topic that you can anticipate coming up in your office as you're optimizing. Marketing, that is a team activity for any practice. You guys know who your patients are, you know who you want to have as patients in your practice, and you know what it takes to take care of them. And in a larger sense, all of that is the messaging of your marketing. That's how you should talk to people and attract them to your office. And there are parts of that that everybody needs to contribute to. And truly, from every single position in the office, whether it comes down to patient reviews, patient referrals, the image of your practice, your outward appearance and reputation management, everybody in the practice has a hand in the marketing of a practice. So that's a subject that you can anticipate. Practice management software. I think the national statistic is that we use in 30th percentile of what our practice management software has to offer, meaning that there's an awful lot that it can do for us. We tend to do the same few things with our practice management software over and over again. I am not suggesting that all of a sudden we should become students of the practice management software and try and research how to do every single thing that it does. But the point is that it's there to serve us. And there are a lot of processes in an office that we do repetitively, either by hand or because we have to think them through or because we coordinate with manpower, whereas some of those things can be done by our practice management software. We just haven't taken a step back and used it to its fullest potential. So that's something that you can anticipate. Having meetings in the office. Which meetings should we have? We're not here to be professionals at having meetings, but we are here to have as many meetings as it takes to facilitate the smooth care of our patients all the way through the whole office from start to finish. And the meetings required excuse me, are a good investment for the practice. We want to keep them short and we want to keep them effective. We want to have them when they're necessary, but we also want to jettison out of the practice any unnecessary meetings and points of coordination that you might be involved with. Another area is insurance optimization. That hits on other parts of the practices differently than another. So maybe the front office has more involvement with that, but the back office is involved with that too, because patients who are sitting in the chair talking to the doctor and the assistants and the back office staff about the care that they need, they are thinking about insurance sometimes, and they need the right conversations about what role insurance plays and how to take care of their health despite what they might consider their financial limitations. Sometimes the back office is tasked with that, meaning creating value and doing patient education, but they don't have enough information about insurance. Sometimes the front office has too much information about insurance and they don't get enough coordination with the back office on the value that's there to be had. So these are points that we want to bring up at this time that show you this is where our coordination is aimed. This is where our communication is centered, is on these parts of the practice. And taking a whole team approach to this will improve your efficiency, but it won't feel like a chore for you to have to address the efficiency of your practice. It's just more a combining of efforts. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. We're looking forward to working with you on these parts of the practice. We're looking forward to you working on an ongoing basis with each other to accomplish these things in the right frame of mind. That tends to make things go as quickly as possible and get the best results for you. I think I'll take a moment here just to see if anybody has any questions or any feedback about having done this in your own practice and the kind of results that you've gotten. Anyone have any questions at this time? Any ideas that we want to toss around back and forth between practices? Okay.
Oh, not anymore.
I can't tell if we have a question coming or not. Well, let's do this. Most of you know how to reach me directly. My email address is coming up on the screen and my direct phone number as well. If you do have any questions, please let me know that. We want to make sure, again, that you and your staff have access to this entire presentation, that it sets the stage for how you want to move forward. But we understand that that's quite general in nature. And the specifics of how we're going to do this together, and you're going to do this on your own on a day-to-day basis, is certainly something that we need to address through your consulting, your coaching, your use of ePracticeManager, and there's a lot more to it than that. So reach out to me and let me know if there's anything that you need. If I get feedback from other offices, I will take the time to share it with everyone because we're all in the same boat. We're trying to accomplish the same things, and I think it would be helpful for you to hear the feedback that others have as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. Looking forward to continuing working with you. All right, take care.